Hi everyone, so unfortunately I can't be in today to give my part of the group presentation because I've got an injury that needs taken care of, but nevertheless I thought I'd make a video to go along with my slides. Hopefully this doesn't cause any technical issues or anything of the sort. If it does, I thoroughly apologize. And with that, I'm just going to get right into it. So I'll be talking about the American suffrage movement through the lens of modernization theory. So yeah, moving on to the first slide, prelude to revolution. So women, I believe, have always recognized that their traditional station as subordinate to men, which was supported by legal and religious institutions, placed limitations to their life choices, reinforced the importance of marriage as a means of survival, limited personal freedom and self-expression, self-fulfillment, and excluded women from engaging in the political sphere, essentially purporting the idea that women are second-class citizens in their own countries and nations. And obviously this would create dissatisfaction amongst women. But one might ask, with all this dissatisfaction, why wasn't it like kind of mobilized to political action? And this could be argued that dissidence was avoided on account of internalized ideas of what was expected of women, and ensuing social and legal repercussions and religious repercussions as well. Persecution by hanging, burning at stake, status of social pariah, leaving women to destitution, and these ideas of radical women were seen as dangerous, and this was sort of the tradition in the extreme patriarchal world, traditional patriarchal society pre-Enlightenment. So with the Enlightenment now in the 18th and 19th centuries, the critique of traditionalist institutions such as the divine rights of kings, monarchism, colonialism, and the championing of ideas such as the rights and freedoms of individuals during the Enlightenment would lead to political rebellions and revolutions in Europe and the Americas, the US War of Independence and Haitian revolutions as an example there. Okay, so as modernization theorists argue, the period of transition from traditionalist, often oppressive means of governance brings about a sense of great expectation and optimism for change, and this can vary among different groups within a society. So to the next slide, slide 27, that is. In the case of women, the transition from monarchism to republicanism and the ideas of individuals' rights and liberties that champion these revolutions seem to signify that these precious virtues would be extended to women as well. This sentiment is echoed famously in the writings of Abigail Adams, who was the second First Lady of America, in her writings, her correspondence with President John Adams, during the War of Independence, in which she urges him and all men, by extension, to remember the ladies. That is, that when America would become its own country, that the men who went off to fight would remember that women also exist as people and would like to have some political agency. So this obviously did not come to be, as women in the United States would not receive their right to vote to formally enter the political sphere until 1920, which is when universal vote for women across all states of America was ratified, and this was about 144 years after the independence. So and this was only won because of decades of campaigning by the suffragettes amidst all sorts of obstacles, splintering women's rights groups, political and societal distractions. For example, the Civil War the American Civil War of 1861 to 65, which kind of took momentum from women's rights groups, the suffragettes to be specific here, and later on World War I. And all these kind of threatened to derail the cause. So moving on to the next slide, social values and social structures. The suffrage movement thus came to be because of The values, namely equality of the sexes, which ought to have been represented in the political sphere of a large group, namely feminists, suffragettes, and women's rights advocates within the US society of 19th and early 20th centuries, were desynchronized from the social structures, as the intransigent government would not yield these rights to women. So we see that these suffragettes were sort of radical in their views in a patriarchal societal structure, that they were kind of saying that men and women were equal and ought to have the same equal political rights. So ironically, the suffragettes would win the vote by shifting their values, from arguing from the vote on the basis of both sexes being equal. They began to campaign on the basis of their differences, that women, as sort of this symbol of purity and domesticity, would use their vote to ensure a moral commonwealth for all of society. A view that was highly favoured by temperance conservative groups who weren't very happy with sort of the decadence, debauchery, and rowdiness of society, and kind of saw that they could use women's votes to their cause, to their cause. And additionally, women's votes was seen as a way to counteract the black vote, hereby maintaining white supremacy. So other groups, nationalists and white supremacist groups, kind of saw that if the women could vote, then they would vote in their cause and maintain white supremacy and counteract the black vote, limiting the progression of black causes. So moving on to the next slide. Revolutionary success. Hold on a second. Okay. So modernization theorists define revolution as a popular movement which overthrows, supplants, or transforms a political regime in an irregular, extra-constitutional and/or violent way. And this was in the Goodwin reading that we had. So the suffrage movement fits this criteria. The movement challenged the Constitution. For example, the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848, which is the conception of the suffragettes movements, they really quite literally challenged the Constitution by kind of rephrasing the language in which famously it's written as, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, but they're kind of saying, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men and women are created equal. And this kind of echoes back to what I was saying about the initial values of the suffrage movement, that men and women are equal, but that would later on change, of course. And while they never really resorted to violence, the employment of extreme tactics like hunger strikes, picketing, of kind of chaining themselves to the White House gates, and the ensuing harsh reactions they received from law enforcement placed suffragettes in a sympathetic position which would help their cause. While it did not overthrow or supplant the then incumbent political regime of patriarchy, it managed to secure the vote for women, hereby elevating their political power. This would later contribute to shaping the social values and structure of American society. That's to say that women's votes vastly contribute to the election of different political administrations that go on to shape culture, shape policy, and the likes. So, conclusion now. The success of the suffrage movement illustrates that while social values and social structures can be and might be desynchronized in the process of modernization, hereby leading to revolutions and upheaval, intransigent governments and political regimes are willing to incorporate some of the political/social goals of revolutionaries if they benefit the government/political regime's own political social interests. In this case, with the process of modernization into an enlightened society, kind of forgot about women, did not want to give women their votes, but then the incumbent regime kind of saw that saw how they could use that to their advantage to maintain white supremacy and temperance. And so that was kind of co-opted into policy, and that kind of led to the success of the suffrage movement. So that's pretty much it from me. Yeah.